Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It's so good to see faces I haven't seen in a long time return back to the courtyard, and I hope to see even more faces in the coming weeks as people feel more and more comfortable coming back, and as we provide high holiday services both in person and streaming through our YouTube channel. This morning, as I practiced the Haftorah before I came to Shul, I began to think about how many times the Haftorah in Isaiah asks us to wake up. If you open up your Chumashim, your red books, to page 1108, page 1108, we're in chapter 51 of Isaiah, and this is supposed to be a Haftorah of comfort. A Haftorah of comfort, the fourth out of seven, right? There are 7 Haftorahs of comfort between Tisha B'Av and Rosh Hashanah. They're comforting to everybody in the Jewish people except for rabbis, because you know by the time you get to 7, that's Rosh Hashanah. So they should be comforting to you at least. But I read chapter 51 and 52, and you see in verse 17, Isaiah says, Hit'ori, Hit'ori, right? The translation here is rouse yourself. I'll translate that English into English. Wake up, wake up. Then you see, not too far after that, we see the very beginning of chapter 52, a different version of the same word, Uri, Uri. So first we have Hit'ori, Hit'ori. Now we have Uri, Uri. Wake, awaken, awaken. You turn the page. Then the very next sentence begins Hitna Ari, right? Please awaken. This goes on almost the entire parsha. The entire parsha. Why? Why are we being asked to waken up? Well, there's an amazing Hasidic story that explains what Elul is. Elul, this month that we're in, the Hebrew month of Elul, which is all about repentance and all about hearing the shofar blast in the morning in daily minyan, which is an act of awakening in and of itself. We're told that in the month of Elul, it is the month that the king leaves the castle, walks down the mountain, and walks through the fields and makes himself available to the population. For the rest of the year, the king is in the palace, and we are living below the palace, the geography of which is either Jerusalem or, right, some Transylvania portrait in my mind that I could imagine, considering this is a Hasidic story. But the palace is locked off for most of the year, the vast majority of the year. And for 1 month of the year, the king comes down and walks through the fields. And we're told that he picks flowers and admires the goings-on of his people. And the shofar, another way rather to understand the shofar, is the pronouncement of that closeness between us and the king during this month. Just like the trumpets would blast when royalty walks into the room, the shofar lets us know that we are in the presence of something awesome. Wake up. And then, for the act of judgment, of course, for Rosh Hashanah, the king ascends the mountain back again, goes into the castle, and then we walk past the castle, each pleading our case for 10 days. Which are the acts of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, as the Hasidic tale explains. I thought of that this morning as I was practicing these words, as I was practicing my chanting, because when I read the sentence, I'm on page 1110, I'm on verse number 5. What therefore do I gain here? Right? Isaiah, what do I get out of this? Declares the Lord. For my people were carried off for nothing. I would say here you can understand nothing as more than just no reason, more than we were victims. Their mockers howl, declares God. Unceasingly my name is reviled. Now this is the fascinating sentence here, 6, right? Let's say the Babylonians or the Romans or whoever revile God's name. Assuredly my people shall learn my name. We assume that it's the other people who are reviling God's name. But here we're told that the goal of all of this, the goal of all of the comfort, is for the Jewish people to once again learn God's name. The Jewish people to learn God's name. Not for the Romans or the Babylonians to learn God's name, but for us to once again learn God's name, to appreciate the closeness with God. It made me think back to the story. It made me think of the high holidays. It made me think that perhaps if we ever accomplish the task of learning God's name, maybe we wouldn't need Elul and Tishrei at all. I'll put it a different way. Could you ever imagine having a year where you're so good to your mom that Mother's Day is not necessary? It's laughable. It's laughable, right? Mother's Day, there's no way to be that good to your mom, to be that appreciative to your mom all during the year. It's impossible. It's impossible. My mom sits right over here. And so you feel compelled to show appreciation on Mother's Day. The idea that we could ever know God that closely, that we know God's name, that we champion our relationship with God, that the whole world looks at the Jewish people and says, those are people that appreciate the maker of the universe, the creator of all the possibility for humanity to be better. It is so difficult to imagine. And yet, I think the task is that if the king ever came down through the fields and saw us appreciating him with such delight, if we ever met him there, maybe, just maybe, we wouldn't need tickets 3 weeks from now to come into the courtyard and hear the shofar blasts on that day. So let's all aspire this week, the following. We're only 2 weeks away from Slichot, believe it or not. Let's aspire to show a little more appreciation. Do one thing that somebody would look at you and say, that person must be Jewish. That person must be Jewish because they're doing that amazingly wonderful thing that Jews do. Each of us, that thing could be different. But if we could do one thing out in the open that the king would see in the field, it'll make that Mother's Day, Rosh Hashanah, that day when we blast the shofar, not to tell us to wake up, but to show that we are awoken, it'll make Rosh Hashanah this year that much sweeter. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.